Hi everyone, Stepan here. It's Thursday, so we're going to continue the series on Mikail Tal, and we are still looking at the Riga 1949 series of games. We still have quite a few to cover. So Mikail Tal was 13 years old, still very young, but already very powerful. And this game is very interesting when it comes to e4, e5 openings, especially the closed Ruy Lopez, because it features a theoretical debate and it also features a strategic problem for black. Mikail Tal played black, which occurs often in one of the most irritating variations black could play in the Ruy Lopez. So here's what happened: e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and now we get the standard closed Ruy Lopez move order. We have a6, bishop a4, knight to f6. Now, of course, it shouldn't be mentioned that bishop c6, dc6, knight e5 is faced with knight takes e4, so this is no advantage to white. So white castles, bishop e7 played, and still the same thing can be applied: bishop c6, dc6, knight e5, knight e4. However, after rook e1, this pawn actually is attacked, so now if black does nothing, if black simply castles, then bishop c6, dc6, knight e5 would win a pawn. So black continues b5, and after bishop to b3, black now has two moves. By far the main move is d6, defending the e5 pawn, and after c3, black castles, and white could now choose between two different variations. One of them is the main line of the closed Ruy Lopez, h3, leading to either the Chigorin, the Breyer, the Zaitsev, all other closed Ruy Lopez variations, or the Yates variation with d4, which avoids playing the move h3. And by playing d4, black is allowed to play bishop g4, which is what we are going to see in the game by transposition. However, after bishop b3, Mikail Tal doesn't play d6, he plays castles, and this is the invitation to the Marshall gambit. Of course, the Marshall attack, excuse me, the famous opening that Frank Marshall came up with after, legend says, 10 years of preparation, and then he lost the game to Capablanca, which is unfortunate. However, the Marshall is a very strong opening, so if white simply continues with c3, playing normal lines, this allows the Marshall gambit. Now black could still choose to play d6 and allow either h3 main closed Ruy lines or d4 going into the Yates, but black doesn't have to play d6. Black could play the Marshall, and now d5 is the Marshall attack, and the idea is I'm going to give up a pawn and I'm going to have a very strong attack. So here's the Marshall. So e takes d, knight takes d, and basically the e5 pawn is free for the taking. So knight e5, rook e5. And the idea black has, in compensation for the pawn, white's queenside is completely undeveloped. Black has two bishops aiming at the white king, and the black queen is coming into the h4 square. So after c6 defending the knight, d4 defending the rook, opening up the c1 bishop, we now have bishop d6 gaining a tempo, looking at h2, rook e1, and queen h4. And from here on the line continues. There are 10 more moves of mainline theory, but that's the Marshall attack. So after bishop to b3, Tal invited his opponent Anatole Parnas into the Marshall attack. Parnas declined. He didn't play the move c3. He played the move d4. And now this game is about to be the mainline Yates variation. So in this position, he could choose to play something different. He could choose to play knight takes d4, Tal could, and that's a move. Knight takes d4 is sort of equal. So for example, knight takes d4, knight takes d4. Now you could choose to either, after e takes d4, you can play e5 as white, and the line continues like that. Also, after knight takes d4, there's an interesting variation, which is, I think, the reason players with black don't play this, and that's bishop takes f7, and after rook f7 you play knight takes e5, and after rook f8 queen takes knight, and this is supposed to be slightly better for white. Let me just mention one more thing. So after castles, Anatole Parnas played the move d4, which is anti-Marshall, but going into the Yates variation, there are normal anti-Marshall lines. One of them is a4. This is known as the main anti-Marshall, simply not allowing the move d5, not giving black time for that. Also, you could play h3 as white, which invites the normal d6 c3 closed Ruy Lopez variation, because now the marshal is not as strong, because after ed5 knight d5 knight d5 knight e5 rook e5 c6 d4 bishop d6 rook e1 queen h4 is not as powerful. You're not provoking g3 because h2 is not attacked. So that's the theoretical struggle in this game. After castles, d4 played. Now, as I said, you could play knight takes d4, which is uncommon. Much more common is to play d6, and after c3, we now have the mainline Yates variation, which would occur after d6, c3, c3, d6, d4, excuse me. So in this position, white hasn't played h3, so Tal plays bishop to g4. And now bishop e3 is the main line. And here the main line of the Yates, which I personally really dislike with black, and I'm on the black side of this often, is ed, cd, knight a5, and once the bishop retreats, you get to play c5. Okay, and after c5, white could play either d5 or h3. d5 is a bad move, and I'm going to show you why. And I faced that in a training game. The reason why d5 is bad here is because it allows knight c4 with tempo on the bishop, and there's no easy way to solve this issue. Of course, once the bishop retreats, if it goes to c1, you are going to play knight e5. If the bishop goes to f4 guarding e5, then you take on b2 and you're simply a pawn up. Okay, so the main line goes pawn to h3, bishop to h5, g4, etc., etc. Instead of that, Tal played queen e8, which is a move I've never seen before, and I've prepared the Yates variation with the black pieces, and this has to be simply bad for black. I don't understand the move, I don't know what it does. The only thing I think it does is it defends the knight, but there's basically no reason for that. Also, it could be preparing an attack on e4, which seems highly unlikely that you're going to win the e4 pawn. It also frees up the d8 square for the c6 knight, which could be a reason, but after knight d8, white could simply continue with d5. And now here's the issue. White plays the very normal knight bd2, and in this position, Tal made his second mistake. So in these closed Ruy lines, your c6 knight could often be a problematic piece if you get it to a5 in an unfavorable moment, when white is able to restrict that knight and make it obsolete, basically. So in this position, Tal played knight a5, which is a normal Ruy Lopez move, but it doesn't work here. What he should have done is simply liquidated the center, which seems unreasonable, but in the Yates variation, where white gets d4 early on, you want to do that. So takes, takes. And now you can play the move knight b4, which seems counterintuitive, but you are going to follow that up with c5. And after, for example, h3, bishop h5, white continues knight f1, knight g3, his normal plan. Now you play c5. And after d5, which is supposed to be punishing this knight, which is a normal way to punish this knight because it doesn't have the c6 square, now we can continue with c4, and white basically has no time to do anything about that because he has to trade his bishop for the knight, and black is better here. So after c5 in this variation, d5 simply wouldn't work, which means that the knight could safely retreat back into the center, and if, for example, knight g3, let's say bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, knight c6, d5, knight e5 would be very good for black. Instead of that, however, Tal made a strategic error. He played knight a5, and now after bishop c2, c5, you have an issue. And here's the issue. You can pause the video and try to find a strategically very, very good idea for white. Find a move that restricts black's knight and makes white's life much, much easier. Okay, so the idea is, let's restrain the knight. We can do that with the move pawn to d5. That wasn't played in the game. By the way, Anatole Parnas is an unknown player. This is his only game in the database, so I don't know how strong he was. But this move basically kills the knight. You don't have knight c4 because I'll take it, double your pawns, and make your pawn structure dreadful. You also don't have knight c6 because I'm going to take it. Knight b7, no future for the knight. Even if you do get the knight to b7, you would have to move the f pawn, get the knight to f7, and even then it's not clear where the knight is going. So the only hope I see is knight b7, c4, knight c5, In that case, though, if you play knight b7, I'm going to play c4 myself. And now again, your knight is not going anywhere. So this is a common problem if you get reckless with the knight on a5. After c5, though, his opponent failed to punish that. He played the move h3, which doesn't punish d5. And in this position, Tal took on f3. If he plays bishop h5, then again I think d5 is quite good, and you probably have to play for f5 with knight d7, knight f1, f5, which is for the moment a pawn sacrifice, but you basically don't have any other good moves. Knight c4, since the knight has moved to f1, and this may have been okay with a pawn sacrifice and playing on the king side. Instead he played bishop takes f3, which I think is very sensible, because that doesn't allow d5. Queen takes f3, and now of course if white is given another move, d5 could be played, so Tal exchanges cd, knight c6, and he basically didn't get punished for his strategic mistake of playing knight a5. I still believe white is better, but not much, because this knight is now back in the game. Here again, I think d5 should have been played. It's not as bad as it used to be, because this knight could go to b8, to d7, and to c5, and if you play b4, I could play a5, undermining that, but it would still make the knight very awkward. If you, for example, try knight b4, then bishop b1, and it's not clear where this knight is going, I think you have to play a5 here, and this knight seems like a really bad piece. So after knight c6, perhaps white didn't want to close the center down, which is okay. Rook d1 played, and now finally the threat is rid of ed4, and finally now we have this Ruy Lopez isolated d6 pawn, and there is no threat of d5 anymore. In this position, his opponent, of course, his pawn is attacked, so bishop g5. His bishop is attacked, excuse me. And here knight e5 was played, which seems scary, threatening d3, but there was a very safe move here, which simply makes the position equal, or I think slightly better for white, and that's queen e2. d3 is really not a threat, and for example knight f to d7, bishop e7, queen e7, something like f4, and knight c6 should be perfectly equal. Eventually this pawn is going to be regained with something like knight b3. You could win it straight away, and obviously white's pawn structure is better, and white should have a slight edge. Instead of that, after knight e5, Anatole Parnas just lost the game. He played the move queen g3, and pause the video. It's black to play and win. So from an equal or slightly better position for white, white just lost the game. Punish it, win the game for black. Okay, there is a move that either wins a piece or traps the queen, and that's knight h5. After knight h5, white should resign. So you don't have a way to defend the bishop unless you play queen h4. And when you play queen h4, it's not that I exchange the bishops or I lose my knight, but I play the move f6, attacking your bishop, defending my knight, forcing your bishop to move, or forcing you to counterattack with g4. Now, if the bishop moves to f4, of course it couldn't move to e3, then I simply play g5, winning a piece, because if you take, the queen has to move, and the queen is actually trapped. So now you lose the queen, you lose the bishop, you lose the game. So after f6, g4 is forced. And that saves a piece, but virtually loses the queen, because after fg5, queen takes h5. I hope you can find the winning move here. That's g6, and now of course your queen is trapped. The queen can go to h6, that's true enough, but the g5 pawn is protected, and your queen is never getting out. Knight f7 played, threatening to win the queen. Bishop to b3 is forced. Unfortunately, there is no way to defend, to block this bishop spin on the knight, so you have to play king h8. White is forced to trade, and after queen f7, your queen is not getting out. You would have to play h4, but that's much too slow, or you would have to play knight f3, which is for the moment impossible because I just take it. White plays rook f1, defending f2, probably the only option. Queen to f4, a very powerful move. So if you had to think of a way to attack white to continue this game very aggressively, this is one of the best ideas. With queen f4, Tal is basically preparing either bishop f6, bishop g7, winning the queen, or bishop f6, bishop e5, checkmating on h2, which is even better. Knight b3 played, sort of has nothing to do with the position, attacking the d4 pawn, but bishop f6, as we said, two threats, bishop g7 and bishop e5. Knight takes d4 played, again, not much to do with the position. Threatening knight to e6, so if you play bishop g7, I play knight e6, and I probably equalize, but bishop e5. And now white has to struggle to defend mate. Knight f3 is the only move. Of course, after knight f3, you're giving up a knight to get your queen out, so queen f3, queen takes g5, and now after queen takes h3, white resigned. There really is no good defense to queen h2 mate. If you try f4, which is the only move that defends queen h2 mate, then I win by simply taking your rook. I take on f4, and if you take with the queen, I take your queen. If you take with the rook, I play queen g3 check or queen e3 check, and just win. So this would be game over. Now again, this is a mate in a couple of moves. If you play rook g1, then queen h3 is mate. If you don't play rook g1, then I play rook f2 and mate you on h2 or on g2. So a strategically unsound game by Mikail Tal, but the one tactic he got in, his opponent fell for, and he punished it. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it's an undeserved win, because he did outplay his opponent in the end, but strategically he played badly, and any strong grandmaster would have punished knight a5 with d5. So I think that was a very instructive point. So for all of you Ruy Lopez players, take this issue seriously. You could lose games to an untimely knight a5. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you liked the video. Let me know what you think, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.